Good morning. Welcome, friends, colleagues. Welcome to the 2018 Asan Plenum. I hope you enjoyed the video. Uh, you have to know the lyrics, but I think most of you know the lyrics, and we try to set the scenes exactly to the lyrics. We had a one-year hiatus last year, and we didn't hold the Asan Plenum last year, but we decided to hold it again this year. Well, of course, it's our 10th anniversary, and so as I promised a lot of our friends, we would do it this year. But at the same time, we saw what happened to the world the year that we didn't hold the plenum, and how it had completely fallen apart in the meantime. So we thought we had to do something about it, and so here we are. As I said, it's a 10th anniversary. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but we've had an incredible ride. Thanks to so many of your support and friendship, and of course participation, most importantly. And of course, I had this incredible sponsor and backer and friend and mentor in Dr. M.J. Chung, who's been just incredibly generous in terms of everything and made everything that we see here today possible. So could you be recognized? Please stand and give a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We chose the theme illiberal international order with this year for a couple of reasons. Well, one reason is that given the timing of our conference, we thought it would just completely turn into a North Korea summit-related meeting for 2 whole days, and I wanted to prevent that from happening. Although obviously that's perhaps the foremost in the back of all of our minds, and perhaps the most important issue at hand. And by the way, of course, as so many of you noted, what perfect timing, and we've all had it planned, as you know, and we've had very close coordination with our partners up there, and so the only thing we'd ask was that just don't do it on the 24th and 25th. So they decided to do it on the 27th. So anyways, it's just very nice. But the second reason we chose this title, of course, is because I think for Korea and for the region, for everybody, in order for us to strategize, to have our own grand strategy, we really need to have a very clear sense of where the world order is and where it's going. And so that's where I hope to bring everybody's wisdom together to try to chart where we think the global order is going, and where our respective countries and where our respective regions are within that particular context. Speaking of context, you know, talking about the liberal and the illiberal international order in Korea, I always like to say that South Korea is really the poster child of the liberal international order. I mean, Korea, we didn't, you know, we were a former colony, national division, terrible war, one of the poorest countries in the world, no liberal tradition or no democratic tradition to speak of, but look where South Korea is today, and in terms of liberal democracy and free market economy. I would say if South Korea can do it, anybody ought to be able to do it. So in that sense, I think we really are the poster child of the liberal international order. Of course, as our title indicates, we're living at that stage, period in history where many of us, I think that some of the pillars, the fundamental assumptions of the liberal international order that has brought so much prosperity, peace and prosperity to Korea and South Korea and to many other parts of the world is beginning to falter. As for Korea, we find ourselves in a very interesting historical juncture, of course. I think there are two big movements, pincer movements, that is pressing South Korea at this point as a poster child of the liberal international order. One is, of course, as I try to show in the video, one is on the side of the builders and sustainers of the liberal international order. There's a sense in which the pillars of the liberal international, such as the United States, such as Great Britain, EU, are going through their own moments of very deep doubt regarding the viability of the liberal international order. In a sense, I would like to describe as sort of a post-liberal, post-democratic, post-industrial, even postmodern reaction to, I guess, what could only be described as a very successful liberal international order that these leading industrialized and democratic nations of the world have enjoyed. So there's deep anxiety and doubt coming from the heart, the core of the liberal international order. At the same time, we find, again, as you've seen in the video, many countries, such as China, Russia, and other places that are undergoing what I think are actually very pre-liberal, pre-democratic, pre-industrial, and very pre-modern reactions to the liberal international order. So what I'm saying is that I think the liberal international order is being squeezed from two different directions, one from the pre-liberal countries and one from the post-liberal countries. And these are very fundamental reactions that we need to deal with. East Asia, I think we came to this liberal international almost by accident. As I said, I don't think any of our East Asian countries had a liberal or democratic tradition to begin with, but things worked out in such a way that we are now enjoying this incredible regional integration. And look at the economic prosperity that we enjoyed amongst our East Asian nations. Now, I think history is coming back, a lot of things are coming back, which are actually beginning to undermine this liberal international order by accident, almost by accident, that we've had in East Asia. And of course, the North Korean development of nuclear weapons and their provocations is part, and one of the most important sort of spearhead of this reaction against the liberal international order, in which, of course, North Korea is one of the clearest, most obvious outliers. So I think how we navigate these very turbulent times, how we sustain, what is it that we can do to sustain this liberal international order? Is there something that a country like South Korea can do? Is there something others can do? Perhaps while the liberal West is going through moments of deep self-doubt, is there something we can do to sustain it in the meantime? So that's the theme for the next couple of days. And as you've noticed, we've tried to organize many different panels covering all aspects of it. We try to look at the economic, obviously the economic trade aspect of the liberal international order. That has brought so much prosperity. But at the same time, we are also looking at the alliances system, for instance. What are the systems that have backed up, that have sustained the liberal international order? Last but not least, it's the domestic internal reactions to the liberal order that so many of our countries are going through that we'll be examining. So basically, there are three pillars here. We always get the complaint from everybody that we have so many good panels so that it's very difficult to choose which ones to go through. But if you look at the program very carefully, those are the three pillars that run through. So if you want to just go through the trade and then that economic aspect of it, that you can go just to those panels. If you want to do the alliances, you can do that. If you want to do the domestic reactions that we're experiencing, you can always go to those as well. We've even, for the first time, we've instituted nighttime sessions for those. Well, you're all jet lagged anyways. You won't be able to sleep, so might as well just come to our session, right? So we've added 2 very special sessions as well. So let me stop rambling on, and I will now introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ed Feulner, who seriously does not need an introduction. But I'll tell you, well, 2 things, obviously. You know, when Dr. Chung founded this institute, heritage definitely was one of the models that he wanted to follow. And so, and of course, Ed Feulner and late Chung Ju-young, they go way back. Ed has been just an incredible friend of South Korea and supporter of the alliance. And so it's only right that we have him here. But also, I'll tell you a story. I don't know if you remember, Ed, last October 2016, before the election, you came by Korea, and we had dinner with MJ. And of course, we were speculating about the election. And I have to say that I wasn't, you know, I didn't predict the outcome, okay? So, but one of the things, you know, we asked you, okay, so, you know, what do you think is going to happen if Trump becomes president, Mr. Trump is elected, and what do you think is going to happen to the Korean Peninsula policy? And you said, if nothing else, it'll be very different. He'll try something that none of the others have tried. So you were right. So, and here we are. And so, as all of you know, Heritage Foundation has basically been the only think tank in Washington that has had any input, major input into the Trump administration. And so for anything, you're responsible for a lot of these things, Ed. And so I'm going to put you on the spot, but please join me in welcoming Ed Feulner to the stage for the keynote speech.
Thank you very much, Chaibong. I have a heavy burden. It is a pleasure, indeed, to be back at this Asan Plenum, and I thank both Chaibong and my good friend MJ Chung for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to address our theme. As Chaibong already indicated, my perspective is perhaps unusual to a number of you because I will be defending the administration of President Donald Trump. My operating assumption is that in Donald Trump's opinion, and in my opinion, America's foreign policy is based on protecting and advancing the interests of the American people. This is what I define as an America First foreign policy. And I remind you that, as President Trump has said on a number of occasions, an America First foreign policy does not mean an America Only foreign policy. All of us who know our geography as well as our strategy realize that America has a certain geographic advantage not afforded to any of our allies. Our host country here confronts a hostile, alien regime on its immediate border, a competitive expansionist regime across the sea to the west, and an former occupying power to the east. Japan, in turn, has unresolved rival territorial claims with Russia, a competitive relationship with China, and North Korea, lobbing missiles across its territory. Taiwan, not always mentioned in this context, has a close bilateral relationship with the United States, punches above its weight in international economic matters, but faces certainly formidable challenges across the Taiwan Straits. Our friends in Europe live in the shadow of a resurgent Russia, and our allies in the Middle East, Muslim, Christian, and Jew, confront a complex set of prospective and real adversaries, all in intimate proximity to each other. America, the largest economy and the predominant military power in the world, has the advantage of a basically peaceful neighborhood and the opportunity to pick and choose the places where it's right where it might forward deploy its military assets in its own national interest and in the interest of its people. Therefore, I believe that a president who proclaims an America First policy fits our needs and our understanding of both who we are and where we are. This is a definition of Trump revised liberal international order circa 2018, or what I call the new international order. Yes, it's an America First foreign policy, Trump style. So please accept that definition, at least for the remainder of my remarks. My second definition is that the Trump administration seeks to work toward an open and a free society because most Americans seek expanded individual opportunity and freedom under the rule of law. We seek freedom because freedom enables each individual to make choices on her or his own. Trumpism is one of two polar opposite versions of today's American populism. We'll be talking more about that in our panel discussion. It's a populism of the right based on the Tea Party movement, represented politically by Donald Trump. The alternative version of populism in the United States, based on the Occupy movement, represented politically by Bernie Sanders on the left. So it's a very interesting time indeed in American domestic politics as well as the international arena. How did we get here? 1987, more than 30 years ago, Donald Trump wrote his first book, The Art of the Deal. Fast forward, August 2016, he invited me to serve as a senior member of his presidential transition team. 2 months later, I was traveling in Asia and had the dinner to which Chaibong referred with MJ and Chaibong. And that was several months before the presidential election, at a time when the overwhelming political consensus in Washington and indeed around the world was that Hillary Clinton would be the next president of the United States. Well, I accepted candidate Trump's invitation. I was number 13 in the transition team, and I reread my copy of The Art of the Deal carefully. There's much to be learned from reading that volume. I found some relevant arguments regarding what has become President Trump's conduct. First, Trump, the deal maker, said, if you're going to think anyway, you might as well think big. He did. Running for president of the United States is a big thought. Another Trump dictum in the book was to, when you think big, go into negotiations or even discussions and become a disruptor. Come up with new ideas that are so far outside the conventional boundaries of what is considered possible that you are effectively changing not only the debate, but the whole framework, the whole range of options in which the debate is being conducted. What Donald Trump, the disruptor, does is expand that field of debate so that the margins move significantly beyond the way a question is conventionally considered, either in Washington among the think tankers and the politicians, or around the world by both our friends and adversaries. Let me give you an example of an international encounter where Donald Trump thinks outside the box. I'll leave it to others during the course of these days, or according to the Left Atlantic magazine, to give Donald Trump credit for getting Kim Jong-un to participate in the forthcoming summits, as it recently did. But instead, let me give you an example that's out of area, as we say, and I think it's revealing. During the 2016 presidential campaign, on a number of occasions, candidate Donald Trump said, and this is a quote, NATO may be obsolete, members are not meeting their spending commitments, they have to pay up. Every time he said it, the political establishment of both parties in the United States and, of course, all of Europe told us that it was an outrage that he would talk that way. At that time, most of the political establishment, at least several months before his election, echoed that viewpoint. I had the good luck to have counsel from former Defense Secretary Don Rumsfeld, who had served not only as Defense Secretary, but also as American ambassador to NATO. And Don said to me in early October 2016, Ed, I don't understand it. When I was ambassador to NATO and later at Defense, I would go around giving dinner speeches saying that Europe had to spend more on NATO, and all I did was put everybody to sleep. Donald Trump says the exact same thing, and everybody is outraged and dumps on him. And that's the way it was during that campaign. Now, 18 months later, a new report from NATO, just issued last month, states that in 2017, the first year of Trump's administration, quote, NATO members increased their military spending by a net 5%. The NATO report further notes that before Trump, there were only 3 countries plus the US in NATO which were meeting the 2% of GDP goal. By the end of this year, there will be 8 plus the United States. I don't think this happened by accident or just by the goodwill and generosity of our NATO partners. My point is, when you change the framework of the debate and talk seriously about an American pullout from NATO, if the burden isn't shared more equitably, then instead of marginal requests to pay more, a la Barack Obama, Bob Gates, and others, you can actually change the decisions of political leaders who have a significant stake in the outcome of the negotiations. Another point. A fundamental tenet of Trumpism when he campaigned is that the American political system is rigged, primarily against average Americans. It's rigged because, as his political opponent Hillary Clinton said during the campaign, and I quote, "You have to have both a private and a public position on issues. Otherwise, you can't get things done, or otherwise people will be able to see through you." As candidate Trump said in response, this was not the example of transparency that most Americans would like to see in our elected officials. It's also one of the reasons why Trump talked about draining the swamp of the Washington establishment, because the whole Washington-based agenda was both non-transparent and out of touch with so many Americans. So far, think big, expand the debate, drain the swamp. The fourth fundamental tenet of Trump populism has been that the economic order that resulted from this rigged system was unjust to the interests of many Americans. We see this theme repeated in discussions about trade. From this perspective, look at the results of the 2016 presidential campaign. Trump carried Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, states that traditionally vote Democrat, but where voters were disenchanted over what had happened during the past 30 years to them under both political parties. They saw and lived with skilled assembly line workers losing jobs, factories shutting down, heartland America becoming ghost towns, and general economic dislocation. Enter Donald Trump. Trump argues that free trade is good as long as it is fair and reciprocal. He knows that the benefits of free trade are spread among the many, and the negative impact of free trade is very concentrated in specific areas, specific industries, on specific people who are severely hurt. The next, fifth fundamental tenet that defined and still defines him was that the nation was moving in a direction that many citizens neither desired nor endorsed. This included some of the cultural issues that Washington is arguing over at this time. And it includes a top-down, interventionist, ill-defined and ad hoc American foreign policy, which is a major component of the liberal international order. So with these 5 principles as a background, how did that 2016 election happen? It's clear that the cultural collapse and the globalism of the Obama administration was not acceptable to Trump or to his voters. The people demanded a reversal, and even though those in the mainstream media and the Washington establishment overwhelmingly rejected that and still reject Trump and his policies. Where are we now? The leadership of President Trump and his cabinet in deregulating at every department of the federal government has made economic opportunity more available across the board to virtually every American. So far, his most significant legislative achievement was a tax cut bill he signed into law last December. It positively affected every business, big, small, and medium, and millions of ordinary citizens who received actual cash bonuses in their paychecks and whose tax withholding now is lower than it was previously. And those business tax cuts are starting to bring increased economic growth, record high employment, including among women and minorities. Trade, an issue of, I suspect, more than passing interest to most of our participants here. Let me say that those of you who've known me over the years know that I was a sincere and strong advocate for China's accession to the WTO almost 20 years ago. Frankly, I'm disillusioned. Today, we see Chinese firms violating international sanctions, dumping on world markets, stealing intellectual property, outlawing the sale of Bibles under the guise of an edict supposedly promoting religious freedom, unilaterally changing long-standing joint venture contracts to give Communist Party apparatchiks enhanced roles in senior management, where formerly there was none, and continuous closed markets to American and European firms. And the United States is not the only country that has expressed concern about the unfair trade practices that have been prevalent in so many Chinese industries and been promoted by the Chinese government. Is this evidence sufficient for the president to impose the tariffs that he's proposed? I think you could argue that either way, maybe, maybe not. He has heard vigorous arguments about it internally. And I cite this as an example, too, of how he thinks. Earlier this month, Heritage hosted Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who articulately defended a tit-for-tat trade policy for the Trump administration. Then, just a few evenings ago, I hosted a small dinner party in honor of the new National Economic Council chairman, Larry Kudlow, probably the most outspoken free trade advocate in all of Washington in either party. Larry's the man the president turned to when he said, let's take another look at possibly joining the TPP. Wow, those are competing viewpoints, and they are all being heard in the White House. That brings me to my point on that. This president, unlike what the media portrayal of him is a president who listens, who thinks, and then makes up his own mind. He pays attention to opposing views, and then he decides, and he expects the whole team to get on board and to follow his decision. And to my mind, that's the way the executive branch of the United States government is supposed to work. So from my perspective, the Trump administration is basically a positive story. So several of you last evening remarked to me that Donald Trump is an unconventional president. That's for sure. I agree with you. We live in unconventional times. America and much of the free world has been involved in years in wars with an unconventional enemy in the form of international terrorists, Toronto today, who claim no sovereign territory or capital city, but whose activities cost our taxpayers, and many of yours as well, hundreds of billions of dollars to deal with. And now, in Europe, we're facing another unconventional enemy in the realm of unconventional warfare. This hybrid war has reached a new level. Little green men, as they have been called, invaded, occupied, and still control the Crimea, a sovereign part of the territory of an independent nation, Ukraine. This army wears no uniforms, is heavily armed and controlled, or at least directed, by a foreign government, in this case, Russia. These forces have since invaded more of eastern Ukraine and are actively participating with Russian troops in Syria, where the United States has killed a number of them. Yes, we're living in a new era, and a new era requires new thinking. And I believe that this involves reshaping and rethinking the liberal international order. The liberal international order, in Donald Trump's view, cannot mean a blind adherence to the old way of doing things, including interference in all the world's crises and in consistent and repeated international nation building. He has said that a strong America understands that, quote, caution and restraint are really true signs of strength. And again, this president has repeatedly promised that America first is not America alone, and that America, our allies, and world peace are best served by, quote, a disciplined, deliberate, and consistent foreign policy. I believe that Trumpism is wholly compatible with democracy and the American tradition. And in fact, as an active participant in the Washington public policy process for more than 50 years, I believe that only someone from outside the political system could be making the necessary fundamental changes to update our way of doing business that this president is advocating. Donald Trump may be outrageously unconventional with the way in which he communicates different ideas and his current thinking, a la Twitter. But that's the way this president operates as he gets beyond our mainstream media with what he calls its fake news by communicating directly with the American people. And it's interesting to note that everyone from Putin to Macron to May to Xi all are now tweeting back. There is much of Trump's policy and belief that I cannot cover in my limited time this morning. And regarding populism, as I say, I will be speaking more about that in our panel discussion later. Finally, Donald Trump, the disruptor, the big thinker, the unconventional, the tweeting president, knows that he's in a tough fight with those who oppose him and who are determined to undermine his agenda. He fights every day for his populist agenda, which is his version of the liberal international order. My time is up. I hope these remarks will give you a different perspective of President Trump's way of operating and thinking, and I hope that I've perhaps sparked somewhat of a debate at today's opening session of the Asan Plenum. Thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you. We will now take a break. The first plenary session, titled The Rise and Fall of Liberal International Order, will begin in this room at 10:30. Thank you very much.